My name is Natalie Harper. I'm 34 years old. And if you had told me 7 years ago that the charming man I met at my best friend's wedding would eventually drag me into court over a child I had never even met, I would have laughed in your face. Not because Daniel Mitchell seemed harmless, because back then, he seemed perfect. We met in 2016 at my best friend Jake's wedding in Napa. I was part of the wedding party, and Daniel was one of the groom's friends who had somehow volunteered himself into helping with everything from seating cards to champagne. The rehearsal dinner was held outside beneath strings of warm lights, overlooking the vineyard. Daniel caught my attention almost immediately. Tall, dark hair, expensive-looking suit that I later learned his father had bought for him. The kind of smile that made you feel like whatever you had just said was the most interesting thing he'd heard all evening. "What do you do?" he asked. "I am an IT consultant for a healthcare company." His eyebrows lifted. "So hospitals basically collapse without you?" I laughed. Something like that. At 34, I can admit how ridiculous this sounds. At 27, it worked. I had a stable career, a decent salary, my first house, savings, and one obsession that consumed most of my weekends, a battered 1967 Mustang. My dad and I had been restoring since I graduated college. Daniel seemed fascinated by all of it, especially my job. At the time, I thought he admired my ambition. Laughter. I realized he was calculating what my ambition paid. We hooked up after the reception. Classic wedding mistake. Except, it didn't feel like one. We kept talking afterward. Daniel lived about an hour away and worked as a social media manager for a tech startup that was supposedly building the Facebook of pet owners. He made it sound revolutionary. 6 months later, the company collapsed. Daniel called me crying. I gave them everything. Nut. By then, we were officially dating. His lease was ending. My house had 2 spare bedrooms. And I made what would become the first in a long series of decisions that seemed generous at the time. Move in with me until you figure things out. He arrived 2 weeks later with designer luggage, 3 boxes of shoes, camera equipment, and approximately 0 savings. That was when I started learning about Daniel's family. His father had paid for everything: private school, college, his first car, his apartment, credit card bills, vacations, even his phone. When Daniel turned 25, his father finally cut him off. Daniel described it as abandonment. I should have heard entitlement. Instead, I heard pain. Once he moved in, Daniel announced he was starting his own social media consulting company. For weeks, he sat at my kitchen island, creating presentations about branding funnels, audience conversion, premium positioning, and client acquisition. There was only one thing missing: clients. Then he asked to borrow my credit card, just for essential startup costs. Those essential costs included a $2 MacBook, a professional ring light package, and nearly $1 worth of new clothing. When I confronted him, Daniel looked genuinely hurt. "You told me you believed in me." "I do. But $3,000 without even discussing it. Investment in yourself is the best investment." He kissed my forehead. Then somehow I ended up apologizing. That was Daniel's talent. He could walk into an argument owing you money and walk out making you feel guilty for mentioning it. Still, there were good moments. Road trips with no destination. Coffee waiting beside my laptop before work. Little notes hidden in my purse. He even started spending Saturdays in the garage with my dad and me. "What's that?" "Carburateur." "And that?" "Distributor." He listened closely. Or at least pretended to. My father never completely trusted him. Daniel knew it. I knew it. Nobody said much. 2 years after we met, Daniel proposed. We married in 2018 at the same vineyard where we'd first met. The wedding was beautiful and expensive. My parents helped a little. Daniel's parents talked constantly about contributing, but somehow never actually transferred anything. Most of the bill came from me. During the reception, my father pulled me aside near the bar. Did you sign the prenup? I rolled my eyes. Yes. Dad. My friend Mike was a lawyer, and he'd practically threatened to drag me to his office himself if I refused. Dad relaxed slightly. Then he looked toward Daniel, who was laughing with friends beside the dance floor. Just remember something. What? Someone who loves you shouldn't need your credit card to prove it. I hated that sentence, mostly because part of me already understood it. 3 months after the wedding, I got promoted. My salary jumped to around $150. Ling ling ling. Daniel celebrated by quitting his job. Without telling me, I came home one Thursday and found champagne chilling in the refrigerator. What happened? He wrapped his arms around me. I finally did it. Did what? I quit. I stared at him. You quit your job. I'm finally free to build something that belongs to me. Within weeks, our home office became a content studio. $5,000 disappeared from savings we had earmarked for roof repairs. Camera, lighting, microphones. A pink velvet couch? Daniel. He smiled. It photographs beautifully. Then came his YouTube channel. Luxury lifestyle. On a budget. The irony would have been funny if the budget hadn't been mine. Designer shoes appeared. Jackets, watches, electronics. Daniel claimed he returned everything after filming. Somehow, plenty of it stayed. Then, he decided the garage would make a better wellness studio. The garage where my Mustang sat. The Mustang my father and I had spent 5 years restoring. One evening, I pulled into the driveway and found a stranger walking around it. Can I help you? He looked confused. I'm here about the Mustang. My stomach dropped. What Mustang? The one for sale. Daniel had listed it on Facebook Marketplace. Without asking me, I walked inside holding my phone so tightly, my fingers hurt. You listed my car. Daniel barely looked up. We need the space. That isn't your decision. You barely drive it. It doesn't have an engine in it yet. Exactly. I had never yelled at him before. That night. I did. Daniel cried. Then he called me controlling. He told me I cared more about a pile of metal than his future. The next morning, he apologized. I believed him. But the garage door started getting left open. Boxes appeared beside the fresh paint. Tripods fell against the fender. Then, one afternoon, a metal yoga rack scraped a long white line across the quarter panel. My father had spent 3 weekends refinishing. I stood there, staring at the damage. Daniel appeared behind me. It was an accident. Something inside me already knew it wasn't, but I was tired. So tired. A month later, I sold the Mustang. My father barely spoke when I told him. He just nodded and wiped his hands on an old shop rag. That silence hurt more than any lecture could have. 5 years of weekends disappeared on the back of a flatbed truck. And 3 weeks later, almost every dollar from the sale disappeared too. Daniel had booked himself a business retreat in Bali. I thought selling the Mustang was the worst thing I would ever let him take from me. I had no idea he had already learned the password to my retirement account. Selling the Mustang should have been the moment I woke up. Instead, I told myself marriage was compromise. That sentence became my favorite excuse. Daniel came back from Bali sunburned, energized, and carrying 2 suitcases full of products he claimed were samples. He talked for 3 straight hours about personal branding, wellness funnels, premium coaching, and something called energetic alignment for entrepreneurs. I sat at the kitchen island listening while he paced around me barefoot, wearing linen pants that probably cost more than my first laptop. "So what exactly are you selling?" I finally asked. He smiled. Transformation. That should have terrified me. Within a month, our garage was stacked with boxes, essential oils, face serums, meditation cushions, skin care kits, printed workbooks. Daniel launched a website calling himself a holistic wellness strategist and lifestyle curator. I paid for the domain, the branding package, the photographer, the ads. He got 0 clients. Not one, but somehow he managed to accumulate almost $15,000 in credit card debt buying inventory for a skincare line that expired before he ever sold it. When I asked why dozens of unopened boxes were still sitting in the garage, Daniel stared at me like I was the problem. "You never promote me." "To who?" "Your coworkers. Their wives. Your friends." "My coworkers work in healthcare IT." "Daniel." "Exactly. High-stress demographic." I wish I were joking. By then, I was working 60-hour weeks. I'd leave before sunrise, come home after dark, and find $200 worth of takeout on the counter because Daniel had been too emotionally drained to cook. The house was constantly messy. Tripods in the hallway, clothing racks in the guest room, half-open shipping boxes everywhere. His YouTube channel had 342 subscribers, but online, he presented us like we were living some carefully curated luxury dream. There was only one rule. I wasn't allowed to follow him. "It messes with the analytics," he said. I actually accepted that explanation. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, my retirement account sent me an email. Loan confirmation, $30,000. I thought it was phishing. Then I logged in. It was real. Someone had taken a loan against my 401k. My hands started shaking. I changed the password immediately. Then called the plan administrator. After 20 minutes of security questions, the representative confirmed the request had been submitted online using my credentials. I knew exactly who had done it. When I confronted Daniel, he didn't deny it. Not really. He just crossed his arms and said, "I was going to tell you. You took $30,000 from my retirement. For a business opportunity. You forged my authorization." "That's dramatic." I stared at him. "What did you spend it on?" He hesitated. "That told me everything. It was a mentorship program. Some Instagram entrepreneur who promised to help Daniel build a 6-figure personal brand and reach 100,000 followers. $30,000. Gone. I spent the next week sleeping in my office. Not because Daniel kicked me out, because I couldn't stand being in the same house with him. At night, I lay on a couch under fluorescent lights, listening to my father's voice in my head. "Someone who loves you shouldn't need your credit card to prove it." I finally called Mike at 2 a.m. He answered on the second ring. "Natalie, I think I ruined my life." There was a long pause. Then he said, "Send me your calendar. Come in tomorrow." Mike never said I told you so. That made it worse. The next morning, I brought him everything. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents, screenshots, receipts. He spread them across his conference table and read in silence. Then his expression changed. "Nut. What?" "These 3 credit cards." I looked. I didn't recognize them. All 3 were in my name. Total balance, $47,000. Daniel had opened them without telling me. I felt cold all over. Mike leaned back. "This is fraud." I stared at the numbers. 47,000. On top of everything else, he said retail therapy helps his anxiety. I whispered. Mike actually laughed once. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. Then he opened the prenup. Remember the financial misconduct clause? Barely. Mike pointed to it. You're protected better than he thinks. That night, I drove to my parents' house. Mom cried before I even finished explaining. Dad sat at his workbench cleaning a carburetor. He didn't interrupt once. When I stopped talking, he set the part down. She won't. He caught himself. Daniel won't stop. I looked at him. He'll keep going until he hits bottom or finds another target. That word stayed with me. Target. For the first time, I stopped thinking of myself as Daniel's wife. I started wondering if I had ever been anything else. I filed for divorce 3 days later. Telling him was easier than I expected. Mostly because Daniel was filming. I walked into the kitchen and found him arranging organic groceries around the island for a video called My Productive Morning Routine. The refrigerator behind him was nearly empty. The display on the counter had cost almost $300. I waited until he finished a take. Daniel. He glanced at me. What? I filed for divorce. He froze. Then something unbelievable happened. He reached for his phone. Pressed record. Guys, he said softly to the camera. I need to be vulnerable about something. I walked out. The next month was chaos. First came the love bombing. Old photos. Long texts. Flowers. A box containing several Mustang parts I thought he had thrown away. We can buy another one, he said. Restore it together. No. Then came the threats. I'll tell people you were abusive. I'll ruin your career. No man will ever want you after this. And finally, social media. Daniel began posting about surviving financial abuse. According to him, I had controlled every dollar, prevented him from working, crushed his ambitions, and punished him for becoming independent ace. The comments worshipped him. Mike built spreadsheets. By the time we finished documenting everything, I had spent more than $200,000 supporting Daniel's various businesses. His lawyer tried to argue for substantial alimony because Daniel had sacrificed his career for our marriage. Mike pulled up Daniel's own Instagram. Self-made entrepreneur. Independent business owner. 6-figure mindset. CEO energy. The argument collapsed. The divorce was finalized in March 2021. Daniel got far less than he expected. He kept the cameras, the lighting equipment, the pink velvet couch. I agreed to a small settlement because I wanted him gone. Outside the courtroom, Daniel gave me one final performance. You're throwing away the best thing that ever happened to you. I looked at him. The best thing that happened to me was Mike making me sign that prenup. His face changed, just for a second, then I walked away. The next year was quiet, beautifully quiet. I got promoted into senior management, started exercising again, rebuilt my savings, bought a 1,970 Chevelle that needed more work than good sense. Dad and I spent weekends restoring it. Sometimes, neither of us spoke for hours. We didn't need to. I even started dating again. Carefully. His name was Ethan Cole. He worked as a paralegal and was applying to law school. He liked cars. Actually, liked them. The first time he spent 2 hours listening to Dad explain ignition timing. I almost cried. By January 2023, my life finally felt like mine again. Then one evening, I came home and saw a certified envelope in my mailbox. County Courthouse. My stomach dropped. I opened it in the driveway. Read the first page, then the second, then the first again. Daniel Mitchell was petitioning the court for child support. The child's name was Aiden James Mitchell. 1 year old. Daniel claimed I had agreed to become Aiden's legal mother through a private parentage arrangement shortly after our divorce. He claimed I had abandoned my responsibilities. He wanted $2. $800 a month. Back support. Medical coverage. and recognition of me as the child's legal parent. I had never seen Aiden, never met him, never signed anything. But attached to the petition was a declaration, and at the bottom of the page was my name, Natalie Harper, with a signature that looked almost exactly like mine. I called Mike from the driveway. He answered with, "Please tell me this isn't Daniel again." "It's Daniel again." There was silence. "What did he do?" "He says I have a son." Another silence. Longer this time. "Come to my office tomorrow morning. Bring everything." "And Natalie?" "Yeah. Do not call him." I looked down at the signature again. I wasn't planning to. "Don't text him. Don't post anything. Don't respond if he contacts you." Nothing. That night, I barely slept. I kept staring at the court documents spread across my dining table. Aiden James Mitchell, born November 2021. According to Daniel's petition, shortly after our divorce, he had entered a private reproductive arrangement with a surrogate. The paperwork claimed I had previously agreed that if the procedure resulted in a child, I would accept legal parentage. There were consent forms, financial declarations, even an acknowledgement supposedly signed by me. The signatures were good, disturbingly good, but they weren't mine. At 8 the next morning, Mike was already reading when I arrived. Ethan came with me. Mike spent almost an hour comparing signatures from the petition with documents from my divorce. Finally, he tapped one page. He copied this. "What? Your prenup signature?" He placed the pages beside each other. The shape of the N, the unusual way I crossed the H in Harper, even the slight upward angle. Identical, not similar, identical. Mike looked at me. Signatures don't reproduce themselves perfectly every time. This one was digitally lifted. My stomach tightened. So what happens? We challenge parentage immediately. Daniel had apparently hoped I would miss the response deadline and allow the court to enter orders based on uncontested paperwork. He filed around the holiday backlog. Mike noticed that too. "He knows enough about the system to be dangerous," he said. We demanded DNA testing and challenged every parentage document Daniel submitted. Then, Mike hired a private investigator. His name was Robert Ellis. Within a week, Robert found something none of us expected. A woman named Christina Anderson. Chris, she was 36, worked as a software developer, and had lived with Daniel for most of 2021 and 2022. More importantly, she had been sending him approximately $1.500 every month for Aiden. Those payments stopped in October 2022. Daniel filed against me in December. "Backup plan," Mike said quietly. The phrase made my skin crawl. Robert contacted Chris. 2 days later, she agreed to meet us at a coffee shop outside town. She looked exhausted. Not angry. Not yet. Mostly embarrassed. "I met Daniel in March 2021. She said. "That was the same month our divorce became final. He told me his ex-wife financially abused him." I almost laughed. Chris noticed. "I'm guessing that was you." Apparently, Daniel had told her the same stories he posted online. I wouldn't let him work. I controlled his money. I sabotaged his businesses. I was jealous of his independence. Then Daniel told Chris he desperately wanted children. Chris had mentioned that years earlier, before undergoing treatment for a medical issue, she had frozen eggs at a fertility clinic. Daniel became obsessed with the idea that they could build a family. A few months later, he told her he had arranged everything through a private reproductive consultant. Surrogate, legal paperwork, embryo transfer. He handled it all. Chris paid him thousands towards supposed medical expenses. He showed me ultrasound pictures. She whispered. Mike leaned forward. "Did you ever meet the surrogate?" "No. Attend appointments. Daniel said she wanted privacy. Then came November 2021. Daniel disappeared for several days. When he returned, he had a baby. Aiden. He told me the surrogate delivered early. Chris's eyes filled. I believed him. For almost a year, she raised Aiden with Daniel. She bought diapers, formula, furniture, started a college fund. She believed Aiden was biologically hers. But as the months passed, Daniel became strangely defensive whenever she asked about finalizing legal paperwork. There was always an excuse. Courts were delayed. The agency misplaced something. The surrogate needed to sign another release. Finally, Chris demanded a DNA test. Daniel exploded. He said asking for DNA meant I didn't love my own son. I knew that technique. Turn the question into betrayal. Make the victim defend themselves. Chris bought a home DNA kit anyway. Before she could send it in, Daniel disappeared with Aiden. He emptied half their apartment while she was away at a work conference, blocked her everywhere, then sent one final message. Your lack of trust destroyed this family. Chris stopped sending money. 2 months later, Daniel came after me. But Chris had something Daniel hadn't expected. Receipts. She had saved everything. Message, bank transfers, emails, security footage from their apartment building. One clip showed Daniel carrying envelopes supposedly from the fertility agency. Another showed him throwing paperwork into the dumpster after Chris questioned him. Robert recovered enough information to trace the agency. It didn't exist. Neither did the reproductive consultant, neither did the surrogate listed in Daniel's paperwork. Then my court-ordered DNA appointment arrived. I remember sitting beneath fluorescent lights while a technician swabbed the inside of my cheek. It took less than 30 seconds. 5 days later, Mike called. No biological relationship. I closed my eyes. I should have felt relieved. Instead, Mike sounded worried. Not. There's another problem. What? Chris had herself tested too. I sat upright. And she isn't Aiden's biological mother either. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I understood. If Daniel hadn't created Aiden through Chris's frozen eggs, and I obviously wasn't his mother, where had Aiden come from? Robert started digging into the birth records. The certificate Daniel submitted claimed Aiden had been delivered through a private home birth. The listed midwife was named Margaret Bell. Robert found her. She was 71, retired, and furious. I haven't delivered a baby in 3 years. She told him. Her license number had been stolen. The address listed for the home birth was even worse. Robert drove there. Vacant lot. No house. No birthing center. Nothing. Mike subpoenaed hospital records. No matching delivery. No surrogate. No legitimate medical trail connected Daniel to Aiden's birth. Then, Robert found Daniel's old social media messages. He had been contacting pregnant women throughout 2021, private adoption groups, single mother forums, postpartum support communities. His messages always sounded compassionate. Do you have support? Have you considered temporary guardianship? I know organizations that can help. One woman replied to Robert immediately. Her name was Jessica Parker, 29 years old. In November 2021, she had given birth to a baby boy. She suffered severe postpartum depression afterward. During that period, a man approached her, claiming he worked with a private organization that helped overwhelmed new parents arrange temporary care. Jessica signed paperwork. She believed her son would be placed with a vetted family for several weeks while she entered treatment. When she returned, her son was gone. The organization vanished. The phone numbers stopped working. The paperwork was fake. Jessica had spent more than a year searching. Robert showed her a photograph of Daniel. She started crying. Then he showed her Aiden. Jessica didn't hesitate. That's my son. The courtroom hearing was 3 days later. Daniel arrived carrying Aiden. He wore a plain sweater. Tired. Expression. Carefully unshaven face. The devoted single-father costume. He even gave me a small smile when he saw me, like he still believed he was in control. Mike leaned toward me. Don't react. Daniel's attorney requested another delay. The judge refused. Then Mike stood. Your Honor, before this court considers support, we need to address evidence that the entire parentage claim was constructed using fraudulent documents. Daniel's smile disappeared. Mike presented the forged signature, the non-existent reproductive agency, the fake surrogate, the retired midwife, the vacant lot birth address. Then the first DNA results. I was not Aiden's biological mother. Chris was not Aiden's biological mother. Daniel's lawyer stopped taking notes. The judge looked directly at Daniel. Mr. Mitchell, where did this child come from? Daniel swallowed. It was a private arrangement. With whom? The surrogate requested confidentiality. Name her. Daniel looked at his lawyer. His lawyer looked down. Mike opened another folder. Your Honor, we believe we can answer that question. The courtroom doors opened behind us. I turned. Jessica walked in. The moment Daniel saw her, every bit of color drained from his face. Daniel stared at Jessica like he had seen a ghost. For the first time since I had known him, there was no performance, no wounded expression, no carefully controlled voice, just fear. Jessica stopped beside Mike's table. Her hands were shaking. Daniel immediately pulled Aiden closer. This is inappropriate. His attorney said, rising. We had no notice of this witness. Mike didn't even look at him. Your Honor, Ms. Parker contacted our investigator after recognizing Mr. Mitchell and the child. Given the allegations involved, we notified the appropriate authorities before today's hearing. The judge looked at Jessica. Ms. Parker, you understand you're under oath? Yes. Her voice cracked. Yes. Your Honor. Mike began carefully. When did you give birth? November 2021. Daniel shifted in his chair. To a boy. Yes. What was his name? Jessica swallowed. Noah. I looked at Aiden. Jessica did too. Her eyes filled immediately. Mike continued. What happened after the birth? Jessica described the postpartum depression, the sleepless nights, the panic attacks, the feeling that she couldn't safely care for herself, much less a newborn. Then Daniel appeared. Not as Daniel Mitchell. He used another name. He told Jessica he worked with a private family support organization that helped mothers experiencing postpartum mental health crises. He knew exactly what to say. Jessica whispered. That sentence hit me harder than anything else. Of course he did. Daniel always knew exactly what to say. He convinced Jessica that temporary guardianship would allow her to enter treatment without risking permanent loss of custody. She signed paperwork. Daniel promised her son would stay with an approved family for several weeks. Then Jessica entered treatment. When she came out, everything was gone. Phone disconnected. Office address fake. Website deleted. Her son vanished. I called the police, she said. I called everyone. Daniel suddenly stood. She gave him away. Jessica turned toward him. No. You signed the papers. You told me they were temporary. His attorney grabbed his arm. Daniel. Sit down. But Daniel was unraveling. She couldn't take care of him. The courtroom went silent. The judge's expression hardened. Mr. Mitchell. I gave him a home. Sit down. I raised him. Mr. Mitchell. Sit down now. Daniel dropped into his chair. Mike waited. Then placed another document on the evidence table. Your Honor, there's one straightforward way to establish whether Ms. Parker's claim is true. Dana. The judge ordered an expedited test. Daniel objected. His attorney didn't. That told me everything. Court officers took control of the process before we left the building. Samples were collected from Jessica and Aiden under supervision. Because of the circumstances, the results were rushed. 6 days later, we returned. I barely slept the night before. Neither did Ethan. At 3 a.m, I found him sitting at my dining table organizing copies of evidence into labeled folders. You don't have to do that, I said. He looked up. I know. That was all. No speech. No promise. Just I know. I realized how different love could feel when it wasn't constantly asking you to prove it. The next morning, Daniel entered court without Aiden. That alone changed the atmosphere. The child had been placed in temporary protective care pending the DNA results. Daniel looked terrible. No carefully selected outfit. No social media-ready expression. Just pale skin and bloodshot eyes. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then came the sentence that ended Daniel's story. The laboratory reports a 99% probability that Jessica Parker is the biological mother of the minor child. Jessica covered her mouth. A sound escaped her that I'll never forget. Half sob, half gasp. The first DNA test had freed me from Daniel's lie. The second exposed something far worse. Aiden wasn't Aiden. He was Noah Parker, Jessica's missing son. Daniel jumped up. I saved him. 2 bailiffs moved immediately. Jessica started crying. You stole my baby. You couldn't take care of him. I was sick. You signed him over. For 3 weeks. The judge slammed his gavel. Enough. Daniel ignored him. I gave that boy everything. Mike stood. You also used him to obtain money from Ms. Anderson and attempted to obtain support from Ms. Harper using forged documents. Daniel turned toward me. His face changed. There it was. The expression I remembered from our marriage. The one that appeared whenever charms stopped working. Pure resentment. This is your fault. I almost laughed. Of course it was. The retirement loan had been my fault. His failed businesses had been my fault. The Mustang had been my fault. The divorce had been my fault. Now somehow this was too... I didn't answer. That seemed to make him angrier. You ruined everything. A bailiff stepped between us. Daniel suddenly turned toward the courtroom doors. For 1 second, I thought he might actually run. He made it 3 steps. The bailiff stopped him. His attorney remained seated. Then something even more surreal happened. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and addressed the judge. Your Honor, given information revealed during these proceedings, I need to discuss the continuation of my representation with Mr. Powaness. Mitchell, before making any further statements. Translation. Even his lawyer wanted distance. What began as a child support hearing was no longer a child support hearing. The court referred the matter to investigators. Then everything started collapsing at once. Forged signatures, fraudulent parentage documents, identity theft, the fake reproductive agency, the stolen midwife credentials, money Daniel obtained from Chris, the false guardianship paperwork Jessica had signed. Authorities began investigating whether Daniel had committed custodial interference and other offenses connected to Noah's disappearance. And because several transactions and communications crossed state lines, federal investigators were contacted as well. Chris and I were granted protective orders. Jessica regained custody after the required child welfare procedures were completed. The first time I saw her holding Noah outside court, I had to turn away. Not because it was sad, because it was too intimate. She held him against her chest while he played with the collar of her coat. She kept whispering the same thing. Mommy found you. Over and over. Mommy found you. Chris stood beside me. Neither of us spoke. Eventually she said, We really fell for the same guy. I looked at her. Different version of him. She nodded. Same script. She was right. Daniel's social media empire collapsed almost overnight. The same followers who had called me abusive and Chris heartless began reposting court updates. His inspirational videos disappeared. Accounts were suspended. People started comparing old posts and noticing contradictions nobody had questioned before. More importantly, investigators began receiving messages from people claiming Daniel had approached them with investment opportunities, family assistance schemes, or private adoption arrangements. Mike warned me not to speculate, so I didn't. I had spent enough years inside Daniel's chaos. I didn't need to live there anymore. Months later, Dad and I finally finished the Chevelle. The afternoon, we started the engine. He stood beside the open hood, listening. The motor settled into a deep, steady idle. Dad smiled. There she is. I laughed. Ethan came outside carrying 3 coffees. He handed one to Dad, one to me, then leaned against the garage door. You taking me for a ride? Dad immediately said. Not until we check the timing. Ethan nodded seriously. Obviously. I looked at him. He winked. No pretending. No performance. No invoice. Waiting behind the affection. Just someone standing in my garage because he wanted to be there. Daniel eventually faced multiple criminal charges stemming from the forged documents, financial fraud, and the circumstances surrounding Noah's disappearance. The final outcome was still moving through the courts. And Mike told me repeatedly to stop reading online speculation. So I did. Chris rebuilt her life too. Strangely, we became friends. Sometimes she came over while Dad and I worked on the Chevelle. There was something comforting about talking to someone who understood exactly how intelligent people could still be manipulated by the right person at the wrong moment. Jessica focused on Noah. She later began working with an organization supporting parents experiencing postpartum depression and advocating for stronger safeguards around temporary guardianship arrangements. As for me, I kept thinking about one moment, not the courtroom, not the DNA results, not Daniel being stopped by bailiffs. The Mustang, that was the moment. Years earlier, Daniel had shown me exactly how his mind worked. He wanted something. I said no. So he made keeping my boundary more painful than surrendering it. First, it was garage space, then money, then credit, then my identity. With Chris, it became motherhood. With Jessica, vulnerability. Daniel didn't suddenly become someone else. He simply kept escalating because manipulation had always worked before. One Sunday afternoon, Dad and I took the finished Chevelle onto the highway. Ethan sat beside me. Dad followed in his truck. I lowered the window. The engine growled beneath us. For years, I thought losing that Mustang represented my greatest failure. Now I understood it differently. The car was gone. The money was gone. The marriage was gone. But the woman who had surrendered all of those things wasn't gone. She had simply needed time to find her way back. At a red light, Ethan looked over. What? I realized I was smiling. Nothing. The light changed. I shifted into gear and drove